When Damon bought that old mountain cabin for just 25 cents, he thought he'd scored the deal of a lifetime. But a week later, strange symbols began appearing on the floorboards, and whispers echoed from beneath the ground every night. He tried to record it, the voices, the hum, the sound of something moving under the cabin, but what the recorder caught wasn't the whispers, it was his own voice answering back. Then the earth began to pulse, breathing in rhythm with him, as if it had learned his heartbeat. And when the gold light crawled up through the cracks in the floor, Damon realized it wasn't trying to scare him, it was trying to become him. The next morning, his cabin was empty, but the soil still glowed. And sometimes, when the wind hits the ridge just right, people swear they hear him whispering back from below. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. You ever meet a man who just wanted quiet? Not peace, not joy, just silence. That was Elijah Briggs, 32 years old, former soldier, walked like a man who'd seen too much and said too little. It was 1964 when he drifted into Dover County, a nowhere place between tall pines and empty roads, the kind of town where gossip echoed louder than church bells. Elijah had one thing in his pocket, a quarter, and a folded photograph of his mother, long gone. He'd been sleeping in his truck, moving from job to job, trying to outrun the noise that followed him since the war, gunfire, screams, memories he couldn't turn off. That morning, a sign caught his eye outside the old courthouse. Property auction, cabin, Woodridge Hollow, starting bid, 25 tonks. He laughed to himself, shook his head, but curiosity tugged harder than reason. Inside, the auction hall smelled like wet coats and cigarette smoke. Maybe 10 people sat scattered on wooden benches, mostly locals. Old men in dusty hats, a woman clutching her purse, and a heavy-set auctioneer named Tommy Hargrove, who looked like he hadn't smiled since 1942. Tommy smacked the gavel. "All right, folks, next up, the Woodridge cabin, been empty since before I was born, starting at 25 cents. Anyone?" Silence, not a whisper. Someone coughed. A woman whispered to her friend, loud enough for Elijah to hear, "Ain't no one stupid enough to buy that place again. Let it rot." He turned, met her eyes for a second. She looked away. Elijah raised his hand. "I'll take it." The room fell still. A few chuckled under their breath. Tommy squinted. "You sure, son? That place is older than my daddy's ghost." Elijah smiled faintly. "I just need a roof." The gavel hit. Sold. 25 cents. No applause, just murmurs. Outside, he handed over the coin, and Tommy scribbled his name on a paper that looked like it had been folded 100 times. As he passed Elijah the key, Tommy muttered, barely above a whisper, "You can keep it, just don't open what's nailed shut." Elijah frowned, about to ask what he meant, but the man had already turned away, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Turingla. The road to Woodridge Hollow was long, rough, and forgotten. Pine trees pressed close on both sides, their branches brushing the truck windows like fingers. The closer he got, the colder it felt, even though it was late spring. When the cabin came into view, Elijah slowed. It stood crooked at the edge of a clearing, half swallowed by vines and moss. The front porch sagged like it was tired of standing. Windows clouded with dust, a chimney cracked from end to end. He parked, stepped out, and stretched his arms to the air that smelled of damp soil and rusted wood. "Home," he said quietly, almost laughing. Buster, his dog, a brown mutt with one bad ear, hopped down and sniffed the ground. His tail lowered almost immediately, a soft whimper escaping him. "Relax, boy," Elijah said, patting his head, but even he felt it, a kind of stillness that didn't belong, dust thick enough to write his name on the walls. But what caught his eye was the corner near the back wall, a wooden hatch on the floor, sealed shut with iron nails, and something else. The edges glistened, like wax that had melted and hardened again. He crouched down, touched it gently. Cold, way too cold for wood. He stood up quick, brushing off his hands. "Probably storage," he muttered. Still, he couldn't shake Tommy's words. "Don't open what's nailed shut." By evening, the sun was gone, leaving the forest painted in shadow. Elijah sat on the porch, a cup of coffee steaming between his palms, watching fog rise off the ground. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried. From behind him, through the open doorway, came a faint creak, wood shifting. He turned his head. The cabin was silent. He chuckled under his breath. Old wood, that's all. But in the next breath, he heard it again, softer this time, like a sigh under the floor. Buster lifted his head, ears twitching. Elijah froze, listened. Nothing, just wind, just his imagination, maybe. He leaned back, staring into the tree line where the mist curled like smoke. He thought about how cheap silence was here, how strange it felt that no one else wanted it. Behind him, something thudded once, gently, from beneath the floorboards. He didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then, nothing again, only silence. He looked down at his mug, hands trembling slightly. "You wanted quiet, Elijah," he whispered to himself. "Well, you got it." He forced a laugh. It sounded hollow. The forest around him didn't echo it back. By the third day, the cabin started to feel less like shelter and more like a guest that didn't want him there. Every time Elijah swept a corner or fixed a board, dust seemed to fall from places he hadn't touched. The walls creaked like they were listening, and that trapdoor in the corner always called, even when sunlight hit it. He told himself it was fine, just old wood and bad imagination. Still, every night right around 2 a.m. came the same faint noise, scratching, slow, rhythmic. Not rats, not wind, something that sounded deliberate. Buster hated it. The dog would lift his head from the blanket, ears twitching, eyes locked on that nailed hatch. Elijah tried banging on the floor once, shouting, "Cut it out," but all that came back was silence, the kind that feels too aware. The next morning, he drove into town for supplies, nails, bread, kerosene, and maybe a little company. The old general store sat at the corner of Main and Nothing. 2 rocking chairs on the porch, 2 old men in them, trading words slower than syrup. He stepped inside. Bells jingled. The air smelled like tobacco, oil, and gossip. Behind the counter stood Miss Layla, white hair pinned in a bun, eyes sharp as a hawk. She looked him up and down, her tone polite but cautious. "You the one bought that cabin?" Elijah nodded, grabbing a can of coffee from the shelf. "Yeah, needed a place to sleep." The 2 men outside laughed softly. One said, "He won't last a week." Elijah pretended not to hear. Miss Layla leaned in. "That place don't take kindly to strangers." He frowned. "You talking about people or something else?" She shrugged, slipping the can into a paper bag. "Depends on what you believe. Last fella who stayed there said he heard voices under the floor. Woke up one morning, all the nails from the trapdoor laying beside his bed." He let out a small, disbelieving chuckle. "And what happened to him?" She smiled without warmth. "No one saw him leave." On the drive back, Elijah kept the radio on, just to fill the silence. But the closer he got to Woodridge Hollow, the more the signal crackled, music fading into static, then into faint whispers he couldn't quite understand. He switched it off. The forest swallowed the road again. When he reached the cabin, Buster was waiting outside the porch, whining softly. The dog's fur bristled when Elijah approached, nose pressed to the floorboards near the hatch. "Relax, boy," Elijah whispered, patting him. "Ain't nothing down there but rot." Still, he crouched beside the hatch, staring. That wax ceiling looked older now, darker somehow. He ran his fingers along it again and noticed something new. Faint markings burned into the wood, small circles linked by crooked lines. He pulled back his hand quick. Ron. That night, Elijah sat by the fireplace, journal open, pen trembling slightly. He hadn't written in years. The last page had been from the war, coordinates, blood types, names he wanted to forget. Now he wrote, "Day 4, cabin feels alive, sounds under the floor, nails cold to the touch. I think I'm hearing whispers, not sure, maybe the wind, maybe not." He stopped. His handwriting looked different, smaller, like he'd been holding his breath. A floorboard popped. Then another. He looked up. The light from the fireplace flickered weakly, shadows stretching up the walls, and then, just under the sound of the crackling wood, came it again, a whisper, soft, slow, familiar. "Elijah, just close." He stood, staring at the hatch. Buster began to growl low in his throat. The whisper came again, a second voice this time, overlapping the first, 2 tones blending like they'd been waiting to be heard. He stepped back, knocking over his chair. Then, silence. He waited, heart hammering, eyes on the floor. Nothing moved. The fire hissed quietly. After what felt like minutes, he whispered, "All right, you win. I'm not opening it." He turned off the lantern, climbed into bed, and shut his eyes, but sleep didn't come. He lay there, listening to the slow creaks of the wood, trying to convince himself that names don't whisper themselves. The next day, he tried to keep busy, fixed the porch rail, chopped some wood, but every swing of the axe brought back the same rhythm, that slow, deliberate scratching. It wasn't coming from the ground anymore, it was in his head, and every now and then, when he stopped moving, the forest felt like it was holding its breath with him. When he went back inside that evening, a folded piece of yellowed paper lay on the kitchen table. He froze. He hadn't left anything there. Hands trembling, he unfolded it. A single sentence written in fading ink. If you open it, you free them all. He dropped it. The wax seemed to shimmer under the lamplight, like something breathing beneath it. Running light salgming in it. That night, Elijah didn't sleep. He sat on the porch, eyes on the tree line, whispering to himself, "Tomorrow, I'll leave tomorrow." But somewhere deep inside, he already knew he wouldn't, because silence wasn't enough anymore. He wanted to know who or what was calling his name. Elijah didn't plan to open it. At least that's what he kept telling himself. By sunrise, he'd already packed the truck, a few clothes, his journal, a flask of coffee, Buster's leash. He told himself he'd head south, maybe find day work on a farm or a factory, anywhere that didn't whisper his name in the dark. But as he stood on the porch, hand on the truck door, the forest looked different, still, watchful. The fog hung low, unmoving, like it was waiting for him to go back inside. He stood there for a long time, chest tight, the cold air thick in his lungs. Then he exhaled through his teeth, turned around and said softly, "One look, then I leave." Inside, the cabin felt darker than usual, not the kind of dark that comes from night, a heavier one, pressed into the corners like it had been waiting all morning. Elijah lit the lantern. Its glow wavered on the wood like it didn't want to stay. The hatch sat in its corner, innocent, still, almost normal. Except now, the wax around its edges had cracked. A single rusted nail lay beside it, as if something underneath had pushed from the inside. Buster whimpered, tail between his legs, eyes fixed on the floor. He backed away until he was pressed against the door, whining softly. Elijah knelt beside the hatch, fingers grazing the rough wood. "You seen this too, boy?" he whispered. He grabbed the hammer from his toolbox and hesitated. His reflection flickered faintly in the brass head, tired eyes, sweat glistening at his temples. He thought about Tommy's warning, about Miss Layla's story of the man who vanished, about that note, "If you open it, you free them all." But what if them was just rats, or air, or nothing? What if all this fear was just leftover noise from a man who hadn't slept right in years? He raised the hammer. One nail came out with a screech, then another. The air grew colder. By the third nail, Buster started barking, loud, desperate. Elijah shouted, "Hush," but the dog kept barking, backing toward the wall. The last nail came free with a metallic snap. The boards shifted slightly. He reached for the edge, prying it open an inch. A thin gust of air hissed out, cold, stale, and carrying the faintest scent of iron and rot. Elijah gagged, covering his nose. God! He lifted the hatch fully. The lantern's light spilled down a narrow staircase carved from dirt and stone. Each step was damp, glistening faintly. He called out once, "Hello?" His voice bounced down and came back softer, distorted. Silence again. He took a deep breath, grabbed the lantern, and began to descend. Ron, ron. The air thickened as he went down, heavy, wet, like breathing through cloth. The steps ended in a small chamber no bigger than a bedroom, its walls lined with wooden shelves. On each shelf sat glass jars, hundreds, maybe more, some filled with hair, others with tiny bones, rusted rings, scraps of fabric sealed in amber-colored liquid. He set the lantern down, eyes wide, stomach twisting. What in God's name? In the far corner, a wooden coffin rested atop a stone platform. It was small, child-sized, its lid fused shut with dark wax that had hardened like rock. He stepped closer. The lantern flickered as he approached, shadows dancing across the coffin lid. The air vibrated faintly, a low hum he could feel in his chest. A name was carved into the wood, almost erased by time. He brushed the dust away. "I am." That was all. He traced the letters with his finger, whispering, "Who were you?" Then something moved behind him. A whisper, softer than breath, brushed against his ear. "Elijah." He froze. The hairs on his arms stood up. He turned, lantern raised, but the room was empty. Only shelves and jars and silence. Then came another voice, faint, trembling, overlapping the first. "Don't let me out again." His heart slammed against his ribs. "Who's there?" No answer. only the soft rattle of a jar tipping slightly on a shelf. He spun toward the coffin again. The wax had cracked down the middle, just a hairline fracture, but enough for a thin wisp of air to escape, cold enough to sting his face. Elijah, the whisper again, this time from inside the coffin. He stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern. The flame jumped high, then dimmed. He could leave now. He should. Every instinct screamed go, but he couldn't. He needed to know what was inside, what the town had buried and forgotten. Hands trembling, he grabbed a crowbar from the corner, wedged it beneath the lid, and pushed. The wax cracked loud, echoing like a gunshot. A hiss filled the room, a long exhale, deep and guttural, like something taking its first breath in a century. The lid shifted an inch. Inside, he saw only darkness at first. Then, a small shape, wrapped in what looked like fabric. Not human, not whole, bones fused with something black and wet. The lantern flickered violently. He leaned closer, just close enough to see a single open eye staring back at him. And then the whisper spoke one last time, clear now, as if right beside his ear. "You shouldn't have freed me." The lantern blew out. Darkness swallowed everything. Elijah stumbled back, gasping, clawing for the stairs. His hand brushed against the jars. They rattled, toppled, shattered. The air filled with the stench of decay, and something else. Old blood, damp earth, smoke. He heard footsteps that weren't his, small, bare, dragging. He bolted up the steps, slamming the hatch shut above him, chest heaving. The boards quivered beneath his hands. From below came the faint sound of breathing. Slow, calm, alive. He staggered toward the door, eyes wild, but the moment he reached for the knob, it turned on its own, locked tight, nails shifting in the frame, as if the house itself refused to let him go. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing against the windows. Inside, the whispering began again, louder now, dozens of voices, layered and restless, all saying his name. Elijah, 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 Elijah. He backed away, shaking his head, whispering to no one, I didn't mean to open it." The cabin groaned around him, the floorboards pulsing with breath, the walls warping in and out as if alive. Buster barked once, then whimpered and went silent. And in the middle of that storm of whispers, Elijah heard one voice rise above the rest, calm, almost tender. "You wanted silence. Now you'll never hear anything else." The first drop of rain hit the cracked asphalt at exactly 3:17 a.m. Not the kind of rain that cools the skin, but the kind that hums, low, steady, like it's carrying static through the air, the kind that wakes something old and heavy. Damon sat in the tent, drenched in silence, staring at the rusted metal box lying between his boots. He hadn't touched it since the collapse. Every instinct in his body told him to burn it, bury it, do anything but open it. Yet, he could still hear it, that faint whisper, a voice that wasn't quite sound. "Das, you already started this." He pressed his palms to his ears, shaking his head. "It's just the wind. It's just the damn wind." But no, deep down he knew. The whisper wasn't coming from outside. It was inside him now. He lit his lantern. The flame flickered, throwing shadows across the torn tent fabric. The storm was crawling closer, low rumbles rolling over the valley like slow thunderous growls. Then the ground breathed. It wasn't a quake. It was suppler than that. The soil beneath him seemed to shift, as if the earth had exhaled. Damon froze. His breath caught. From somewhere beneath the old dig site, a deep, dragging groan rose through the mud. He stepped outside, barefoot, cold rain slapping against his face. The excavation pit, the one they'd sealed weeks ago, was glowing faintly now. A pulsing amber light shimmered beneath the surface, like molten veins under flesh. God, no! He stumbled forward, every step heavier, his body resisting what his mind demanded. His hands trembled as he brushed mud off the edge of the crater. And then, for the first time since the incident, he saw it. The mural, the one they thought was lost when the ground collapsed. It wasn't painted anymore. It was alive. Lines of gold light traced through it, like circuitry, each figure shifting, rearranging. The central shape, that spiral symbol, was moving, slowly twisting outward, like a blooming flower made of light and ash. Damon's breath hitched. "What are you trying to show me?" He stepped closer, mesmerized. The whispers grew louder now, forming shapes, tones, not words, but impressions. Hunger, grief, return. Behind him, voices murmured in the distance, faint but distinct. Two locals, sheltering under the overhang near the field. "Is that him again?" "Yeah." The crazy archaeologist, Still digging in the storm. Man doesn't learn, huh? Some people just can't let things rest. Their laughter was thin, nervous, but Damon didn't hear them. He was somewhere else entirely now, drawn to the hum beneath the rain. The spiral turned one final time and stopped, and then the world inhaled. The rain froze mid-fall, the wind cut out. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then a sudden sharp pulse of light exploded from the mural, flooding the valley in gold. Damon fell backward, blinded, gasping as every nerve in his body screamed. He wasn't standing in the pit anymore, he was inside it. Around him stretched a vast underground chamber, black stone walls carved with symbols, each pulsing faintly. The air smelled of wet earth and something older, metallic. And there, in the center, stood a figure, tall, cloaked in shadow, not human, not spirit, something between the two. Its face shimmered like smoke, shifting between thousands of shapes, thousands of eyes. "You called us." The voice wasn't one, it was many, overlapping, like an ancient choir whispering through his bones. Damon tried to move, but his body was frozen. I didn't mean to." The ground trembled, cutting him off. "You opened what was sealed," it said. "And now, we awaken." The murals around him began to ripple, their figures crawling out of the stone, reaching, stretching, reforming. Each one whispered fragments of his own memories, his father's voice, the sound of the first dig, the laughter of his late partner. They weren't memories anymore, they were alive, pulled from him, like threads unraveling. Damon screamed, his vision blurred. He reached for the box, but it was gone. The figure tilted its head, 1,000 eyes flickering open. "It's not the earth you've disturbed," it said softly. "It's yourself." Then, everything went black. He woke hours later at dawn. The rain had stopped. The pit was gone, just smooth, untouched earth, where it once lay. The tent was half collapsed, the lantern dead. His body was shaking, but the box was sitting neatly by his side, closed, clean, as if untouched. And beneath it, written into the mud, were 5 simple words, burned into the soil. "It remembers what you took." Damon stumbled backward, heart pounding. The whispers were gone, the light had faded, but the silence left behind felt wrong, too empty. And deep in his chest, something pulsed once, just once, like an echo of something ancient, waiting to breathe again. He didn't know it yet, but what had reawakened wasn't done with him, not even close. The tape recorder clicks on, a long inhale. Then Damon's voice, rough, low, cracked by exhaustion. "If anyone finds this, don't come looking for me." The sound of rain bleeds faintly through the background. Not thunder, not wind, just the steady, haunting rhythm of water against the roof of a small cabin. Damon pauses. There's a tremor in his breath, the kind that only comes after days without sleep. It's been 9 days since the reawakening. I don't know how I'm still alive, but something changed that night. The box, the pit, all gone, yet I can still feel it beneath the ground, moving. He clears his throat, the recorder picking up every click of his dry tongue, every breath. Sometimes I hear it whisper my name. Sometimes I answer. The recording distorts slightly. You can almost hear him shift in his chair, leather creaking, a cup being set down. Then softly, almost like he's talking to himself, I see them now, the ones from the mural, in reflections, in the rain. They don't move when I do. They just watch. Silence. A faint gust of wind slips through a crack in the window. I found new markings on the stones near the ridge today. Fresh. The same spiral but deeper. It wasn't there before. Someone's been carving them again, or something. He exhales, shaky. I went to town yesterday. They look at me differently now. I can hear them talking when I pass. And then, as if the memory itself is being replayed through the static, faint voices come in, not from the tape, but around it. He's lost it, I swear, keeps mumbling to himself. Maybe he's cursed. My uncle said they shouldn't have dug up that site. If he comes back down here, I'm not opening the door. Their whispers fade back into the hum of rain. Maybe they're right, Damon mutters. Maybe I am cursed. Or maybe I'm just the first one who listened. He stands. A shuffle, a chair scraping across the floor. The creak of wood echoes. You can almost see it, the small lantern casting weak light, his silhouette pacing back and forth, running a hand through his damp hair. It's not done, I know it. Every time I sleep, I wake up with soil under my nails. I dream of tunnels, vast, spiraling tunnels filled with gold veins, breathing like lungs. He pauses again. Last night, I heard a child laughing from inside the ground. That line lingers. It's quiet after that. You can hear only his breathing. Then, I went back there, to the ridge. The earth's soft now, like it's waiting for me. When I pressed my hand against it, I felt warmth and the pulse, the same rhythm as my heart. His voice drops to a whisper. It's syncing with me. It's learning how to mimic. He sighs. I recorded this because I don't think I'll last another night here. The lights keep flickering. The animals are gone. Even the air smells different, sweeter, heavier, like rust and honey. He swallows hard. You hear a faint tap, maybe his fingers drumming nervously against the recorder. If this is what it wanted, then maybe it's not trying to destroy. Maybe it's trying to become. There's a long pause, so long you might think the tape ended. Then he speaks again, barely audible. I can't tell where it ends. And I begin. A distant thump. Something heavy moves outside the cabin. Damon freezes. His voice lowers, trembling. It's here. A scraping sound. Then another. I can see the light through the window. It's not lightning. It's that same gold glow. It's brighter this time, crawling up through the soil. The sound of wood cracking. Damon gasps. It's under the floor. Static. Loud. Violent. Then, silence. For nearly 30 seconds, the tape hums. Empty. Then a new sound fades in. Breathing. Slow. Not Damon's. Deeper. Inhuman. Then a soft voice. Faint. Almost tender. Layered with thousands of whispers. He remembered what he took. The tape cuts off. 3 weeks later, a group of hikers found the cabin. The door was open, rain-soaked. The inside, untouched, except for the recorder sitting on the table. No sign of Damon. No footprints. Just that faint, strange golden shimmer in the dirt, like veins of light crawling beneath the floorboards. The police sealed the place, declared it abandoned. But the locals, they don't go near that ridge anymore. Not after nightfall, because sometimes, when the storm rolls in, you can still hear it. That same voice, whispering through the wind, soft, calm, calling one name again and again. Damon, Damon. And if you stand still long enough, you'll notice something strange. The earth under your feet breathes back. If you were Damon, would you open the box or burn the whole cabin down? Tell me in the comments what you think really happened to him, and don't forget to follow for more true eerie stories that'll keep you up tonight.